everybody? Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and we do have some Vikings news today. I can't say it's the most exciting Viking news of all time, but we can break it all down, and then we could talk about what is next. I am making out the entire depth chart along with biggest questions for each position and what they've done so far. So I want to go through that with everybody. And also, this is a great night for you guys to ask questions, give your thoughts and opinions, and have a fun little dialogue here. I feel like we've gotten through the first couple very intense days and we've answered many questions about the Vikings roster. And now we can go, whew, okay, let's take a deep breath. Let's assess what we have here with the Vikings roster, talk about what's next, and we can even look at how it compares to the rest of the league, where the Vikings should be in the conversation for Super Bowl odds, win-loss, all that sort of stuff. We can discuss it tonight. So questions, comments, throw them in the comment section right now. I'll give you the quick rundown of what happened so far today in Viking land, and then we can get into your thoughts, comments, questions, and then a little later, we'll go through the depth chart. And also intern Clay has returned and he's got a list of the players who found homes today. He also has his 3 winners and 3 losers of free agency. So I want to go through those as well. So first, the Vikings traded Ed Ingram and they got a 2026 6th round draft pick out of that. And everyone I saw reacting to it was surprised they got anything for Ed Ingram. I think what that tells you is the world is desperate for guards, and they are so desperate that they're going to hope and dream even for a guy that was at the bottom of the NFL in terms of pass blocking and was benched midway through the season. But if you're the Houston Texans, it's not going good over there. They just traded Laramie Tunsil. They just cut Shaq Mason. Their offensive line is a total wreck. It is a steaming pile of wreckage right now, and they are just, I guess, swinging for anything that maybe they could hope to reclamate. Is that the right word? Reclamation project. It's not a good situation for them. So they traded a 6th round pick. Someone from the Texans reached out to me and said, "Hey, what should I expect from Ed Ingram?" And I'm like, I don't know if he's going to make your team, but I guess at this point he might. That draft pick will go down as we focused a lot on Lewis Cine, but that is one of the worst ones considering how much they reached on Ed Ingram on draft night. The expectation for most people on the outside was that he would be a 4th to 5th round draft pick. And when they went up and got him, there were a lot of questioning of the organization. Is that really what you want to do? Spend a 2nd round pick on that guy that most people don't think until should be there until late. And he ends up going bust. And one of the, I think, worst parts of the draft pick is that Lewis Cine turned out to be a much better draft pick because he never hurt you. Lewis Cine never played bad. In fact, the guys who took over for Lewis Cine have been fantastic. Josh Metellus, Cam Bynum, now Theo Jackson. That's great. That didn't hurt at all. The guard position was 2 years of getting quarterbacks hit very quickly and being ineffective in the run game. Big misses in the run game, sometimes big hits. It's not that we're no good games ever, but every couple of games that were good, there were twice as many that were bad. And with a guard, you have to play him. And they hoped and dreamed that he at some point would develop into something, and he did not. And so they get a 6th round pick for him. I guess good job. You get no pats on the back for getting a 6th round draft pick for a pick that not only you blew, but took forever to identify that the guy wasn't very good. And I still think about the 2022 season where they just kept going back to it no matter how much Kirk Cousins got hit because of the right guard and even strip sacked because of the right guard. No matter how badly it went, well, that was 23, he got strip sacked, but no matter how badly it went, they just kept rolling it out there and hoping and dreaming that it would get better, and it never did. And it cost Kirk Cousins ribs getting hit a bunch of times that year because of it. And they never really had any other answer for him. As long as he was there, he was essentially uncontested as the right guard because he was a draft pick. And they need to make sure they don't make that mistake again, that if they do draft someone, you have to evaluate him like everybody else, not just, hey, we drafted him, I'm sure he'll get better. I'm sure he'll get better. I'm sure. And he never did. So it's a tricky game developing and drafting quarterbacks, and it's easier to sit here and say that. I'm sure they were watching the tape from week to week and hoping that, well, maybe he's showing signs. He put together 2 or 3 games that are good and, stuff like that. But it just never got there. And they ended up wasting a lot of time at that guard position with Ed Ingram. So, not exactly a day for celebration when you have to trade away a former second for a sixth rounder. But I wish the Houston Texans the best of luck in rebuilding their offensive line. Also, reports coming today that the Vikings will release Garrett Bradbury if they don't find a trade partner. You know what that means. That means the Vikings are saying to the NFL insiders with the biggest followings, can you please help us find a trade partner for Garrett Bradbury? And once that happens, usually that means there is not a trade partner, but maybe someone will come in at the last minute. I think if you're Seattle or whatever team, I saw my old friend Chad Graff tweeting about Garrett Bradbury and the New England Patriots. He covers the Patriots now. If you're one of those teams and you've got nothing, they released David Andrews, their longtime center. You've got nothing at center. Certainly, Garrett Bradbury is a good answer for you. He's played a lot of football. He's a good leader. And I will always say that they never gave him much of a chance with the guys around him. He is certainly flawed uh, but he's got a lot of starting experience. So I think another team should want him and should trade a fifth round or sixth round pick or something for him. But once you know that the team has to release him, it's kind of like the Sam Darnold thing where once the league knew that the Vikings were going to turn it over to JJ McCarthy, that's why they didn't make the trade on the franchise tag for Sam Darnold. That's why they just said, we'll just take our chances with him hitting free agency. And he ends up officially with the Seattle Seahawks today, which is also funny because it's like all these deals get signed and they're all out there and then they become official and you go, wait, didn't that happen 2 or 3 days ago? But they actually have to sign the contract rather than just agree to it. But Garrett Bradbury getting cut is kind of an end of an era type of thing of them finally taking interior pressure seriously. That's the way I look at it. As long as he was their center, that they never took it seriously how much damage it was doing, that defensive tackles were steamrolling through. And it's very similar. If he's not a first round draft pick, he's not going to continue to play as much as he did. And again, this is me feeling like they left him out to dry a lot. And in a different system, in a system where they ran outside zone all the time, in a system where it was play action a lot, screen a lot. If he was in a system where they ran a lot of screens, I think he's a very effective player. He can get out, he can block, he has a great athletic profile. But in a system where he is asked to just stand in there and go toe to toe in the ring with these defensive tackles, it does not work. And we've seen it so many times. And the Vikings stuck with him. Again, it's not just the previous regime that has made bad decisions on the offensive line. That's my point. And today highlights some of the previous bad decisions that they have made on this offensive line. One was bringing back Bradbury when you don't play the type of system that is going to work for him and then asking him to be something he's not. How often did they run running back screens that were successful? Well, how often did they do it in 2019 with Bradbury as a rookie with Dalvin Cook? All the time. They did it all the time. And that's like what he could do. And they ran outside zone all the time, and he was effective in doing so. And then he would get beat by Kenny Clark or something or Akeem Hicks, but still there was a side to his game that was on the plus because it met his strengths. And so as they get ready to release him or trade him to somebody, it's just kind of a reminder that they liked Bradbury, I think, as a person and as a leader. And he was great this year as a leader. He deserves a ton of credit. He had to take on so much more of the mental load from a blocking perspective than he did before with Kirk Cousins. And they won 14 games with him as the center, calling the shots up front and working with Sam Darnold. And that deserves to be, given some credit where it's due. At the same time, there were a lot of pass rushers who made their way up the middle and forced Sam Darnold to scramble around or make plays under pressure because they didn't have that pass blocking center. So Ryan Kelly is much more of the type of fit that they're looking for. And the same goes for Will Fries at right guard. And we'll see what happens at the left guard. We'll talk about that in a minute. The Vikings did sign a swing tackle. It is pronounced Skol. Justin Skule. That is Skule, which when you look at it quickly, your brain probably goes skull, just because I've seen that word so many times covering the Vikings. But Justin Skule, Skule, and he's a guy that has played a little bit throughout his career. Last year had to play a little more. It was 362 snaps and got solid pass blocking grades as a Tampa Bay Buck. And that's really all there is to it. He's an experienced player. He's almost 20. Well, he's 28, so he'll almost be 29 by the time they actually play. This is a swing tackle and an experienced one. Probably is a little bit of an indicator of that. Walter Rouse may end up being a guard. They also want to have experience, and I don't think it says anything about Christian Darrisaw's recovery. I get questions about that a lot. Kevin O'Connell said at the combine that Darrisaw is on track with his recovery, but there could be a delay into training camp with an injury like that happened midway through last year. So they want to have another option, and they just need somebody better than David Quessenberry. David Quessenberry was certainly a guy who brought a lot of experience, but maybe too much experience in terms of age, and just couldn't really bend anymore the way you needed to bend. Now, Quessenberry, he deserved credit because he came into that Chicago game and played really, really well. And was able to survive. I shouldn't say really, really well, but was able to hang on and survive and allow them to have a tremendous offensive output that day. So there were a few times they called upon that guy and he had to do his best coming off the bench, but they needed somebody better. So Josh Skule is the guy that they get for that. I'm sorry, Justin Skule is the guy they get for that. And there isn't really much more to say about it other than they needed this position filled and they found a veteran who played pretty well for Tampa Bay last year. So you got to give that signing a thumbs up. That's something you needed. And now there's still some more places depth-wise on the depth chart to go through, which we will in a few minutes. So, all right, questions, comments. Let's get into what you guys got to say tonight. Anything on the table that you want to talk about with free agency? What comes next for the Minnesota Vikings or around the league? DL Urbas. I'm sorry. I totally botched your name. What can you get for Bradbury? The answer is probably nothing. Maybe at the absolute best, you're talking about a 6th round draft pick for 2026, probably the same type of return that they got for Ed Ingram. He has a good contract. He's got a ton of experience. Brett mentions that the Colts and Atlanta might need a center, and all of that is true. And if they were trading him before they got Ryan Kelly, then it would be maybe worth a little bit more. But once that guy is clearly out the door and they're just putting it out there desperate for anybody to come trade for him, then you're hoping for pick swaps. You're hoping for late round draft picks. There probably isn't a whole lot. Maybe if there's 2 teams that call them, that you take the best offer, but it's just, I don't know. There's not a whole lot that you can really look for there aside from a late round draft pick, but that's how it goes. Because Bradbury, with all of his starting experience, you would think he would be worth more, but it's a leverage game. You're not going to hang on to him. You're not going to keep him at his price. And if they trade him, they get some more cap space. That's what they really want to do. I don't really think that, I don't really think that they're going to be able to get anything. Timbro Slice says Ed started, Scene couldn't crack special teams. So this is my point, though, that if you draft somebody and they start for you and they're horrible, that's much worse than someone not playing at all and allowing other players to win a competition and become really good. It was so much better to have Lewis Scene never touch the field and have Cam Bynum and Josh Metellus get opportunities and become really good players than it was for somebody to take up that right guard spot week in and week out and not look for other answers because they were waiting for him to develop and it just never happened. I think it's much worse to be forced into playing a bad player for 2.5 years than it is for you just to not play someone at all. If they had just gotten veteran guards who were below average and played them at right guard and never played Ingram, you would have gotten better results. If the Jesse Davis, I think, was better, the guy who they had him competing again with broken knees, like that guy had better results than Ed Ingram did when he actually played. So James says, what is the musts in your eyes to get the absolute most out of JJ McCarthy's first year? Well, they've started to make some progress there, which is they must have a guard and a center who can pass block. That's a start. They must design the offense to work for him. That's something I'm sure KOC's been thinking for 2 years about, or a year and whatever. Okay, I guess it's not even a full year, but the minute he drafted him, or even before he drafted him and was just thinking about drafting him, I'm sure that they've been talking about and discussing and planning for what's going to work best for his skill set. I think they need a little more in terms of receiving options from a depth perspective. They need to run the football a hell of a lot better. That's one thing about Sam Darnold. And I know everybody's over it. No one wants to talk about what happened with Darnold. That's okay. But just to make the statement, Darnold down the stretch did not have good offensive line play. He didn't really get much from his depth wide receivers. He didn't get a whole heck of a lot from his tight end. And he definitely didn't rest on the running game. They really asked the quarterback down the stretch last year against Arizona to go win it, against the Falcons to throw 5 touchdowns, against Chicago to win that game. They really asked a lot of Sam Darnold last year. And I think that with a younger quarterback in JJ McCarthy, you need to ask less. And it's not a diss to McCarthy. It's just, how can you make his life as easy as possible? And that's your question. They had the good defense last year. That certainly helped Sam Darnold. He was not playing from behind. They didn't play in that many shootouts where it was back and forth like that. So you don't want McCarthy having to do that too much. JJ McCarthy's feet are being saved from being stepped on from Ed Ingram. At least he did stop doing that this year, stepping on the quarterback's feet. But the running game, solidifying the rest of the offensive line, pass protection, the leader at center for him, they have most of the parts. They have the superstar wide receiver for JJ McCarthy to rest on. They have the number 2 wide receiver who can make plays downfield. I think they need a screen game. I've been calling for the screen game for I don't know how long, but they really could use that. Wide receiver screens, running back screens, and really the run game. Think about how easy life is when you're Brock Purdy in 2023, which is really what they're trying to do here. They're trying to create a Brock Purdy 2023 where you have a quarterback that is supposed to keep the train on the tracks and make a couple of plays a game. That's what Purdy did for them. That's what you want McCarthy. You want him to be, as I've said maybe many times, like the quarterback that everyone's saying, well, is McCarthy even that good? His whole team around him is so awesome. Like that's what you're looking for. Oh, his running game is so great. His screen game is so great. Is he really a top-notch quarterback? That's what you want. And they have to get that running game improved, which means to me getting another offensive lineman and going out and getting another running back. In free agency, it's just not going to happen. So going into the draft and getting a running back who can maybe score on 3rd and 2 at the goal line. But that's maybe the biggest part is last year, Kevin O'Connell and this offense demanded that Sam Darnold threw the football into the end zone anytime they were inside the 20. That's just a lot to ask for the quarterback to always have to throw a touchdown and never be able to just hand off and go into the end zone. It's the easiest thing in the world for a quarterback to hand off. And the more times you can have that, hey, they got him down inside the 10, handoff, touchdown. All right, back to the sideline. Everything was hard in the red zone last year for the Vikings. I think they really need to improve that. Will Fries helps a lot. I don't know how much of Will Fries tape you guys have been grinding, but he does get a push. He is a violent player. The same thing goes for Ryan Kelly, can still do that. So, I think that's maybe a great place to start. Adam, has the rest of the NFC gotten any better this week? The Vikings seem like they're the only one. Chicago, I think, has, because they went out and fixed their offensive line. That was their main thing. They also got some pieces on defense to help them rush the passer. So Chicago would be a pick for me. And Detroit, did Detroit get better with DJ Reed over Carlton Davis? Maybe not really. Bringing back Onwuzurike was big for them and still a shock to me that he got the price that he got. 1 year, 5.5 million. I don't know. I saw a quote from him where he said something like free agency stinks or whatever. I was just like, what? I think you should have held out longer in free agency because that guy had a good year last year and maybe could have gotten more, but maybe he just wanted to stay with Detroit. I don't know. Detroit has definitely not gotten worse, though, I would say, and maybe a shade better. The Packers have definitely not gotten better. They dropped their center. They picked up a guard for a gazillion dollars. So just in the NFC North, no, the Vikings and Bears have done a lot more than everyone else. The Eagles feel like they're going to do something at some point, trade for somebody or whatever. But no, they lost Milton Williams, so that hurt them. We'll see later on about Clay's list, who he has from the NFC. The Rams have gotten better by getting Devontae Adams, and they're moving on from Cooper Kupp. I think Devontae Adams is a better receiver than Cooper Kupp is right now. That was a big signing, but they're a little more. You're right about the. You meant the NFC North, okay? But just trying to go through the entire NFC. Washington has made a lot of moves. They're definitely improving. I mean, Washington getting Laramie Tunsil has potential huge implications with the fact that that guy is an elite offensive lineman with pass blocking, and they struggled at that position last year. But there hasn't been too many moves where I've said, wow, it's just completely changed the entire shape of the NFC. I wouldn't say there's been very many moves like that that have happened. Let's see. Alexander Madison signed with the Dolphins. Okay, well, you know, Madison is still a guy in the league. I mean, a great person, but man, last year, even with all the opportunity with the Raiders, just couldn't really do much, and that ended up being a bad bet for the Vikings when they went with Madison. John says, I'm thinking now that most of our O-line has been addressed, stick or pick at 24. Yeah, that's one thing that the free agency has been able to do for the Vikings is when I look at the entire roster and depth chart, and I'll go through it in a little bit, I've kind of laid it all out. You really don't see too many positions where you go, boy, they've just got to fill that spot at in the draft. Now, the left guard position has not been filled, and there are still some free agent guards that are out there. And maybe by waiting, they could end up getting someone like Tevin Jenkins on the cheap, or another veteran, Brandon Scherf, unofficial Minnesota Viking for life, Brandon Scherf. But someone like that, like there's still a handful of veteran players who are out there that they could still address it. That's the only position where I clearly see, like, wow, that is a glaring need is left guard. Running back is another one that is important. They could go corner. You could draft a safety if you wanted to, depending on how much Brian Flores wanted it. I would trust Flores more than Ed Donatel to draft the next safety because Harrison Smith is not playing 5 more years in the league, and you're relying on Theo Jackson right now on a 3-year deal, which we all like Theo Jackson, but if they were to get Malachi Starks, or is it Nick Enemware would be the other one. I mean, one of those guys could be a complete game changer at a position that's huge for the Vikings. So there's a lot of things on the table position-wise in the draft, which to me says that you could probably trade down if someone is willing to trade with you. That's always the thing, is sometimes the offers just aren't good and you end up sticking and picking at 24. And it is true that every position you move down, it gets worse in terms of your odds of success. The only thing is that with this particular draft this year, when we did the draft sim the other night, everyone that I've done, when I move down and then I look who's on the board, I'm like, that's pretty good. I mean, that's pretty good for the Vikings still, that there's still plenty of opportunity, but there might be cliffs. There might be, hey, if this guy falls and he's there, then we take him. But if the talent falls off a cliff from the elite guys to the next level down to the next level down, they might have a chunk of players that they see in the second round as somebody to go after. But I think what's happened over these last couple days, the bottom line is we went from, all right, it's kind of got to be this or this or this in the first round. I'm thinking offensive guard, corner, or what would the other position be? Defensive tackle. I still think defensive tackle's on the table because these guys are older and they're 2-year contracts essentially. I know Allen's was technically 3, but it's basically 2. So if you draft somebody, develop them, rotate them, end up having 400 snaps from the guy as a rookie and a little more the next year, well, I'm not going to complain about that. If it's Derek Harmon, then it's a longer term plan as they took with Dallas Turner, clearly. But now we could also say if you don't draft a defensive tackle, you do have a lot of talent there. You could look at corner, you could look at guard. If you get really excited about a running back, you could do that. Even the idea of drafting a wide receiver with Jordan Addison potentially being a free agent in 2 years and also possibly being suspended and three deep and except, you're never going to talk me out of another weapon. And the prices for wide receivers are so high and so few of them ever get to free agency that I kind of got talked into even being a little intrigued by that. I think people would not like it at first, but then you start to break it down and you go, the main question that was asked earlier about JJ McCarthy, that's really the fundamental question they have to ask themselves every single day. How can we make it better for JJ McCarthy? And if that was Burden drops or Golden from Texas, and that's the guy they love, hey, go for it. Like you're never going to get a downgrade from me getting more weapons for your quarterback because that's how you do it. Let's see. Turley. Can the Vikings complete the trifecta by signing Calais Campbell? That would be cool. Calais Campbell, he wins, like, I've seen him win Media Good Guy awards before. I'm kind of intrigued by someone who's older than me coming into the locker room. I don't know if he's going to play this year. I haven't seen whether he is deciding to retire or not. But why not, right? Well, the more the merrier. Really, defensive line rotation. Wide receivers and defensive linemen are two positions where if you sign two guys and draft another guy, or sign three guys and draft another guy, I'm going to say great because they rotate. I mean, Milton Williams got $26 million, and I know he's going to play more in New England than he did in Philly, but the guy played 500 snaps. But that's the world that Philly lives in because Philly has done this every year where they just draft more D linemen and they just sign more D linemen. And they're like, okay, more. And let me know when the last time that hurt them was. Having more weapons or more pass rushers, let me know the last time that hurt a football team. So Calais Campbell, sure, why not? AS says such a weird free agency from the elation of all the big signings to praying they don't make the foolish mistake of signing Rodgers. I saw a report today from Jonathan Jones, I think it was, of CBS, who said that a team told him more or less, I mean, this could take forever with Aaron Rodgers. And then I don't know if you guys saw this, but these things do get pretty funny where there was a picture of Rodgers that someone got of him standing and looking reflective on the beach. This sounds like I'm making this up, but this was real. He's got a towel and he's like thinking like, do I want to play for the Giants? I was just, it hasn't even become a circus yet, but maybe at some point soon it will be. Well, right now, just to give you the update on that, The Athletic is reporting some interest or intrigue. I shouldn't even use the word interest because I don't think they have, but discussion about Aaron Rodgers in the Vikings building. But Adam Schefter was saying JJ McCarthy is their guy. And I've heard nothing from any of the other NFL insiders about any connection. It's been the Giants and it's been the Steelers that have been the two teams connected most with Aaron Rodgers. So as of right now, I haven't had a lot of reason to think that it's anything more than Rodgers wants to be a Viking. And I would too. If I was Aaron Rodgers, I would too. Justin Jefferson did a lot of stuff to the Green Bay Packers while Aaron Rodgers was standing on the other sideline. And so if I were him, I'd be saying, I want to throw to that guy. I want to work with that coach of the year. I want to play in that building. I want to follow Brett Favre's footsteps and get him to the Super Bowl. But is that the right move for the Minnesota Vikings? Absolutely not. And the reason, and some of you get excited about, oh, it's Rodgers, but you're going to have to show me with your hands where he's been good anytime recently. And if he was bad with a bad team, okay, fine. But look at that Jets roster. I mean, you got Garrett Wilson. They brought in Devontae Adams. It was a fine, if not good roster, really good defense, and they still failed. And with Green Bay in 2022, they failed because Rodgers didn't play well. And their coach is Matt LaFleur, who's excellent. He's one of the best coaches in the league. So you could say, well, the Vikings got this and the Vikings got that. And you go, well, didn't the Jets have good stuff? Didn't Green Bay have good stuff? Why would it be different here? I can't make sense of it. Like, totally ignore the circus, totally ignore all the political stuff that he brings and the Pat McAfee stuff. Even just forget about that, because mostly I don't care about any of that. And if he's going to win a Super Bowl for the Vikings, then I would say it was the best move. But the guy is 13-21 in his last 34 games with a good coach in Green Bay and a good team there, and then a good roster in New York. I don't understand why it would be different. So as of right now, the plan makes sense to be the plan. And I just don't think you have to be terrified of JJ McCarthy. But, my friend Kevin Seifert was telling me today about how when Dante Culpepper became the quarterback in 2000, the Vikings looked at Rick Meyer, Dan Marino. The Vikings tried to get Dan Marino in 2000 after he was super washed in Miami. And he had fallen apart the previous season in 99, and they were still trying to get Dan Marino. They had talks with Jeff George about coming back, and ultimately they just had to say, let's just go to Dante. We don't have better options. I think they got Bubby Brister as the backup. You might be doing that right now. That due diligence on all the options is something that maybe you should do, but that's the best they should do with Rodgers. Take his phone call because he's a Hall of Famer. Thanks, but no thanks. JJ McCarthy, you're the guy. But some of you have mentioned there are backup quarterbacks coming off the board. I'm not too concerned about that. There's lots of backup quarterbacks. I promise there's lots left. I know Gardner Minshew signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. There's lots of backups that can still be QB2 for the Vikings. Shahram? Guys are offering me some tough names to pronounce on my guesses, but sorry to anybody who I mispronounce. Sorry about that. In light of all the holes minus running back and cornerback is filled, what are your thoughts on using a third-round pick to draft Tyler Show or Ewers with a third string quarterback? I mean, no, I'm not interested in drafting a quarterback at all for two reasons. Number one, JJ McCarthy's going to be the guy. You draft any other quarterback and people are going to be like, why are you drafting a quarterback? And then it just becomes a thing. Oh, I guess they're having. Now, in a theoretical world, your idea is not terrible, but it's not a theoretical world. Like, we want JJ McCarthy, if you're the Vikings, to think like, I'm the guy, I'm the only person you ever wanted here. There's no competition. If you draft a quarterback that high, it just raises questions of why you did that. And you don't need that for JJ McCarthy right now. Theoretically, more quarterbacks is good, and you can make the Brock Purdy argument and everything, although they didn't do it till the end of the seventh. And they were very unclear on Trey Lance. The other thing is, too, with so few draft picks, you can fill a need there. You could fill a running back need there. You don't need, you can look at the running back or defensive tackle draft and find guys in the third round that can start for you and that can really play for you. So I would not consider anybody else. And the other thing is, too, the history of third round pick quarterbacks, way more Kellen Monds than Dak was a fourth rounder. You're hard pressed to find quarterbacks who are in that middle rounds that do anything. That'd be another reason too. And there's plenty of veterans that are out there. And look, the thing is, you're ride or die with JJ McCarthy. Like, you're either going to the moon or you're going into the dirt with JJ McCarthy as your guy. You spent the 10th overall pick on him. He's shown you really, really good things, and you got to go with that and not take a bunch of swings until you have to elsewhere. Steven says Darnold would have thrived with the O-line additions. The problem, they couldn't have afforded the O-line upgrades and still gave Darnold. Well, you could have. You could have. If you look at the way that they set up the salary cap hits for these guys for this year, you could have. But Darnold didn't want to stay here, for one, which was something that maybe we should have talked about even more. Like, why would Sam Darnold even want to stay here? Clearly, he wanted someplace to be his team. He should. He found that place in Seattle. And we can't go into the past and have them have more cap space to get these guards. And you're right that Darnold would have probably done better with these guards. And he would have done better with the upgrades, even on the defense or the running back. Of course, yeah. I mean, I totally agree. But if Darnold signed for $30 million a year here, they would have set it up to where they could have done all these things. It's either or both, that Darnold wanted to go somewhere else, and he did, or the Vikings were ready to go to JJ McCarthy, or again, or both. Like both of those things could probably be true, that they were ready and he was ready and everybody just shook hands and said, all right. But I do agree that had they done better at the guard position last year, that it would have gone probably better in LA or Arizona against LA with Sam Darnold. And it is unfortunate that the way it worked out, you can't just sort of copy and paste everything from last year, but add Will Fries and Ryan Kelly. If football worked that way, it would be a lot easier. It certainly would. But yes, I mean, I think that the narrative that I've seen in Seattle is, well, Darnold had so much to work with, and it's certainly true with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. But there were also some big weaknesses on the team that might be getting ignored because the Vikings just did so well. But he was forced to do a lot last year that I think they don't want to force JJ McCarthy to do. Joe says wide receiver 3 is a fun discussion. Lots of options: Kupp, Keenan Allen, Tyler Lockett. Do you go with one of the older guys that would make for a nice fit as an underneath option? Or do you go with a third round draft pick like we were just talking about at wide receiver? Or do you go with a much lower level type of signing that doesn't have as big of a name, but might be on the upswing potentially? They went with a Brandon Powell, a Trent Sherfield. When you're digging off the bottom of the barrel, you're going to get players who can do something. That's why they're in the league. And Brandon Powell disappeared this year, but previously showed he could be an underneath guy. And we saw from Trent Sherfield that he could be a blocker. You can run on play actions and throw him the ball a little bit, but it would be preferable to have someone like Lockett, Kupp, or Allen because of their experience. And these guys, they understand defenses. They understand how to get open in space. I saw a stat with Cooper Kupp that he wasn't very good in terms of separation, but you're not running Cooper Kupp if he comes here in one-on-one on the outside, trying to get him open against the corner who's pressing him. That's not what he would be doing. And the same thing goes for Keenan Allen. Can still get open out of the slot, underneath stuff. And they have 3 receivers who are fast, 3 receivers who go down the field. That's great to have. This play, whoever comes in could also rotate with Jalen Naylor depending on the situation, or they could use 4 if they needed to. I like the idea. They've already gone in on this roster on experience, which is they want Jonathan Allen, they want Ryan Kelly, they want Javon Hargrave. They want a very experienced football team. So why not? And a lot of the times, teams that go deep in the playoffs do have a lot of experience. They do have a lot of players who have been there before and gone through it. So I'm not against that at all. All those guys are slower than dirt these days, but they know how to read defenses. They know how to be in the right place, the right time. And that's most of KOC's offense, right? If the wide receivers can be in the right place at the right time, there's going to be opportunities because everyone's going to pay attention to number 18 all the time. We really saw the extreme of that last year. TKS wants, I assume you mean Travion Henderson over Omarion Hampton. Well, that's okay. I like Travion Henderson a lot too. I don't know where they can get Travion Henderson because he had a great combine and didn't he average 7 yards carry? Can you get him in the 3rd round, or do you have to draft him in the 1st round? Because 1st round, that doesn't feel like a great idea. I couldn't tell you the difference between Omarion Hampton and Travion Henderson and how they're going to fit in the NFL. I do know that as part of a duo, I really like that Henderson has hands and he can really fly. I haven't seen as much of Omarion Hampton. Either way is fine with me. Whoever they like. If they like somebody who is a total freak at the running back position to go along with Aaron Jones, hey, go for it. Do it. Draft him. But I don't know if you want to draft him at 24 because the difference between, at least my perception is, the difference between who you would draft, and maybe your point is with Travion Henderson and Omarion Hampton, if you spend big on that 1st round running back, is there a 3rd round running back who's going to be what as a prospect? 5% less as a prospect? There's so many good ones that it's not worth the gap in number of picks or the investment in that 1st round pick. So We've got another backup finding a home. So we'll see if the Vikings can do this. Just now, Adam Schefter, Taylor Heineke, former Viking, stays with the Los Angeles Chargers on a 1 year, $6 million contract. Tim Broad is not like Cooper Cup at 12 million. So the thing about the prices is, and I'll stop saying this when I have to, and that might be next year, is just get players because it doesn't really matter. Look how much money they've spent already, and they still have a bunch of cap space because that's how much they built up. I mean, think about just Kirk Cousins alone, just him alone was 28 million on the cap last year that they had to work around. So now that they have all of that and other players have left and signed contracts elsewhere, and they've got to spend to fill out some of the depth. But for the most part, they just still have cap space, and they've also scheduled out these cap hits to have a lot of them be a lot less this year. And I'm sure that a big part of the thinking is that they can restructure down the road and that the salary cap's going to go up. So a Jonathan Allen, just for an example, Jonathan Allen has something like a $6 million cap hit for this year, $20 million a year contract, right? $6 million for this year in his cap hit. And then it goes up to like 20, but they can restructure it down to like 11, which $11 million by next year, when the cap goes up to 300 million, what percentage is that? Like 3% of the cap. So they're playing this cap game. So if Cooper Cup is $12 million, that's fine. That's all right. And you're likely to get him off your books after 1 year anyway, if that's what he wants on a 1 year deal. Maybe it's a 2 year deal or something like that. Tristan says, who all have we lost? Daniel Jones. Have we lost Cam Bynum? Yes. Yeah. Cam Bynum signed with the Indianapolis Colts. Also, Patrick Jones signed with the Carolina Panthers. I think in terms of your wins versus your losses, they have elevated quite a bit on one side, which is the wins versus the losses. Losing Cam Bynum, but the fact that you've got Theo Jackson right there and Harrison Smith coming back kind of mitigates that. Losing Patrick Jones, but Dallas Turner steps into his role, mitigates that. And then on the defensive line, massive improvement. They'll lose Bradbury, they'll lose Ingram, but massive improvement there if both guys are healthy. So they've made a lot of gains and not a lot of losses so far. Tree Electronic, can we get greedy and get J.K. Dobbins? Good pass protector, strong runner. Don't hate it. Don't hate it. Is Cam Akers gone? Well, Cam Akers is a free agent, but he has not signed anywhere yet. Maybe the Vikings will bring him back. But to your point about J.K. Dobbins, I like J.K. Dobbins a lot as well. As someone who's got a little more explosiveness than Aaron Jones, and I can pull this up, J.K. Dobbins, but I think he had a pretty good rate of creating explosive runs last year. And even though he has some injury history and only played about 50% of the snaps, he still, he was 11th in the NFL in runs that went 10 or more yards. J.K. Dobbins was last year, and that was only in 195 attempts. Aaron Jones was 17th. Now that's only a couple more, but still he was 17th in runs that went 10 or more yards, and Aaron Jones carried 255. So J.K. Dobbins in 50, so that's 60 fewer snaps, had more runs of 10 or more last year playing for the Chargers, and also had a pretty good, let me check this out of curiosity. Dobbins was in the top 15 in terms of yards after contact too. Still out there. And with Rico Dowdle getting basically nothing, I mean, that probably speaks well to what you could get J.K. Dobbins for. Ben says, do the Vikings have to replace any core special teamers, not kicker, punter, but coverage guys? So Sherfield, yes, but they did replace him with a signing. I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. Tavir Thomas, who's been a longtime special teamers who they got to replace Sherfield. I enjoyed watching Trent Sherfield play as a gunner. He was good. TKS wants Norman Lott and Alexander in the mid round. Well, I think Darius Alexander is going to go higher. Norman Lott might be a second round pick. Jonathan Bullard is still a free agent. I can't say for sure that he's gone, but he's still a free agent. Let's see. Rhino Man, tight end depth is low. I'm not concerned about tight end depth. I see some of you want to draft a tight end. No, no. I mean, TJ Hawkinson is still in his prime. Josh Oliver is a really good player. I'm not worried about tight end 3. This is why we need to go to the depth chart. We're going to go to the depth chart here in a minute to really look at it. But tight end 3, I'm not concerned about at all. Joe Flacco was visiting the Giants today, so he might sign there. I don't know if that's the case. I was asked last night about the Sauce Gardner and Jordan Addison thing. That is a made up trade, like not a real trade, but one that someone just made up. So it's not like that's what happens on the internet with this kind of game of telephone where someone says, "Hey, what if you traded this guy for that guy?" And then it's like, "Did you hear the rumor that they're going to trade this guy?" It's like, but no, that was just like a theoretical trade, not a real trade. And I don't know. It seems like some people want to trade Jordan Addison. I do not, because the main thing is JJ McCarthy. Who can he throw to? Corners are great. Who is JJ McCarthy throwing to? I want more receivers. I don't want fewer receivers. More receivers. Anthony wouldn't mind Will Howard in the late rounds. I mean, you guys just want quarterbacks. I mean, yeah, I guess if you're drafting a 7th rounder, but I don't know. I'm just not concerned about that. Like quarterbacks that are picked late in the mid rounds. Yes, there's Tom Brady. Yes, there's Brock Purdy, but most of them just become nothing. And I don't know. Not a position I'm too concerned about. Lucas, QB2, Flacco, Cooper Rush, Jameis, or Kirk. Yeah, no, not Kirk. Someone's going to have to start Kirk. Honestly, someone's going to have to start Kirk because there is a game of musical chairs and the chairs have run out. So someone's going to have to start Kirk probably. Jameis, I want absolutely nothing to do with. Here's the thing. Everybody loves Jameis's personality. The backup for, this is why I like Cooper Rush for this. The backup for JJ McCarthy, here's what I want to hear from him. Nothing, ever. I don't want any interviews. I don't want him doing stuff for Barstool on the street or whatever. I don't want his big personality out there because everybody loves it. No. I want none of that. I want Nick freaking Mullins. Like I know Mullins went to Jacksonville, but I want, and I need somebody better than that to actually play if they have to. But I want that type. I want quiet, hardworking, behind the scenes, elevating JJ McCarthy every day. I want nothing to do with a guy who's going to be out there and doing media stuff and saying things and whatever. I mean, it's just no way. Not a chance. Not for me. Nope. Because I don't need any attention whatsoever on the backup quarterback. I like Cooper Rush. He beat the Vikings once, if you guys remember. Brett says, never thought of picking up Keenan Allen, the Viking killer, to bring him over so he can't hurt us. That does happen in the NFL. That does happen in the NFL for sure. Keenan Allen has destroyed the Vikings. And if Caleb Williams could have found him, he would have destroyed him last year. The number of times that he was open and Caleb Williams didn't find him was actually kind of mind-blowing in that second game. So, some people have mentioned about the camera focusing on the microphone more than my face. Probably, I think that like that happens sometimes when I sit back. It probably does. So I think if I got to sit a little closer. Sorry about that. I know you audio video guys. There's a lot of people who are into that. Also, I think if you watch it on your TV, it always looks a little grainier. Anyway, sorry about that. I'll sit up. I tend to, when we're talking ball, I tend to like lean back. Like we're talking ball. We're having fun here. Let me go to the depth chart here. And then intern Clay has got his winner and loser teams. So I've laid out the depth chart in an article I'm working on, kind of analyzing every position. Let's go through it just one by one, kind of rapid fire here. We'll answer a few more questions. We'll get Clay in the mix and go from there. So the quarterback position, hey, Brett Rippon is still on the team, everybody. Don't discount Brett Rippon. But the biggest question, obviously, quarterback is who's the backup. And that, I'm guessing, is going to play itself out over the coming days. There's still backups available. It's not something that I'm too concerned about. And we'll see what happens there. Maybe it's Carson Wentz. Maybe it's somebody else. I don't know. Maybe it's Cooper Rush, just somebody who's not going to get in JJ McCarthy's way, and that's fine with me. And could win 2 games if they lost JJ McCarthy for 4. That's all I'd be looking for a backup. At running back, will they draft a running back is the main question here on the roster. Aaron Jones, Ty Chandler, and CJ Ham. Or is there something, in free agency still that they're interested in? Dobbins is really the only other guy for me that I would go after. And, the question about Dobbins and whether he's healthy, at least he was last year. I mean, he had a good season last year, so it looks like he's recovered. But there's a few guys out there. One of you mentioned Zach Moss. I would rather get someone who is healthy and is 21 or 22 years old and not somebody who's got a lot of tread on the tires, though. Wide receiver, we've talked about it. Wide receiver 3, who's going to fill out the depth chart is the biggest question. Right now, it's just Jefferson, Addison, and Naylor. And I have not included in this depth chart example, I've not included guys like Thayer Thomas, Lucky Jackson. Like those are camp guys who are going to fight for a position and maybe they'll surprise us. But this is kind of, if we were making out a 53, who are the ones that matter the most? At tight end, Josh Oliver, TJ Hawkinson. Tight end 3 is not a big worry of mine. It is unfortunate that they developed Nick Muse over a couple of years, a lot of years actually, and then the Eagles just came in and picked him up. But that's life. It kind of reminds me of Michael Pruitt or Kyle Carter, like tight end 3s. I don't know. It's just not a position that you usually get too concerned about. They'll develop somebody there. Interior offensive line right now is Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, Blake Brandel, and Michael Juergens. I could probably move Walter Rouse there because I think he's going to be a guard, but we'll see. And are they going to find a trade partner for Bradbury? Who's playing left guard? Those are the biggest questions there. As far as the tackle goes, I guess I could delete this. I wrote, is Rouse going to be the swing tackle? We know that it's now going to be Josh Skule. Edge rusher, not a lot of questions there. No real additions or changes outside of Patrick Jones leaving. Defensive tackle, here's how it looks right now. Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Harrison Phillips, Jalen Redmond, Levi Drake Rodriguez, and Taki Taimani. That is a lot of talent. And my biggest question is just, how do the pieces fit? Like who's playing where? Who's rotating? What are the snap counts going to be? And will the other guys, Redmond, Drake Rodriguez, and Taimani, like, will they still carve out roles? As far as linebacker goes, no depth whatsoever at this point. They need to find some. That's the take. They have 3 linebackers, and Brian Flores is never playing Brian Asamoah, so they need some depth there. As far as corner goes, are they going to draft one? Are they going to add one more? Because right now, it's Byron Murphy, Mekhi Blackman, Isaiah Rodgers, Dwight McGlothern, and Ambry Thomas, who they signed at the end of last year. He's got a lot of playing time. I think there's a draft pick to potentially be done there. And safety, you've got Harrison Smith, Josh Metellus, Theo Jackson. Don't forget about Jay Ward, who could still carve out a role for himself. And they picked up a guy named Bubba Bolden, who's kind of never played, but I threw him in there anyway. And then with the specialists, you know them, and Taveri Thomas. Najee Thompson is still technically on the roster, but I don't know if Najee Thompson will actually recover from his injury and ever play again. So there you go. Quick rundown of the depth chart, where it stands right now and where they could potentially add. So why don't I do this? We'll bring in intern Clay. He's got his list of teams that he thinks are the winners and losers of free agency, but I'll continue to answer your questions while Clay is here as well. So intern Clay, former Penn football player, currently in a dorm room at the University of Pennsylvania. And now to bring Ivy League analysis to the show. What is going on, Clay? How are you? Of course, you're muted. I don't have you muted, Clay. Do you have yourself muted? Okay, let me bring you out and bring you back in and see what we got here. It was such a smooth transition. How about now? Okay, I don't hear you right now. Let's see if we can figure out. Why don't you, go out and come back in. Sometimes the system needs to reset. He's still getting the blame, even if it's my fault. He's the intern. What do I think of Tyler Conklin for tight end 3? Sure. I mean, I think if you're Conklin or Mo Alley Cox, you're probably looking for a little better. But we're really deep in the weeds there. Blade Runner says I'd be fine with Akers. I guess so if he comes back. I mean, I had no problem with how Cam Akers played, and they clearly love him. But I think you're just looking for more there. You're looking for somebody who hasn't had both Achilles tear. That's why I think you want to go on the younger side. Okay, we got you, Clay. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
Of course. I think that is system related, not either one of us. Just so we're making sure who we're divvying out the blame to. No fault for this one.
Mhm.
So your assignment for this evening was to come up with, through the first couple days of free agency, your three biggest winning teams, your three biggest losing teams. Why don't we start with the losing teams? Where do you want to begin with the teams that have lost free agency so far?
Yeah, I want to start with my favorite team to talk smack about this offseason, which is the Cowboys. They reconstructed Dak and CD's contracts for what seems no reason. And they let go of DeMarcus Lawrence, and instead they kept Kevontae Turpin, making him the highest paid special teamer. And I get he's good and all, but what's more important here? And the only additions or notable additions that I saw was uh, Khair Alam and Javonte Williams. So the more and more as this offseason goes, it just seems like Jerry doesn't have a real plan for this team.
Either him or whoever is actually running the team for him. Is it his son, Stephen Jones? I have no idea, but I had an expectation that they would be big players this year. After last year, they just didn't do anything. I also think, though, that agents and players, they pay attention to what's going on. Who has seen the Cowboys over the last year from the outside and gone, you know what? That's where I want to go. They can't even fix their issue with light being in the face of their quarterback and wide receivers. I think they can't get people to go play there. It's a circus. They're not going to pay you what other teams are paying. They clearly are pinching pennies, or their negotiating tactics are just weird where they wait forever. They could have gotten Dak Prescott at probably 45 million 2 years ago. And instead they end up paying 60 because they just screwed around. And I don't know if you do something in a game, Micah Parsons might just do a podcast about you. I mean, it's an odd, it's an odd place right now. And what CD Lamb tweeted after they restructured his contract was, hey, want to get money to win games, to get players and stuff. Now, he probably didn't have a choice just because of how restructures work in those contracts, but at least he thought, oh, okay, we're making some cap space. We're going to make some moves here. My guess is no one wants to go there. And DeMarcus Lawrence, in doing his press conference in Seattle, he said something like, yeah, I knew we weren't going to win in Dallas. Wow. I mean, what a thing to say about a team that just a couple years ago looked like they were on the brink. But I think this is a great selection by you. The Dallas Cowboys, huge losers. They either didn't want to go out and spend the money or could not convince anyone to come there, which is what I think happened.
Yeah, I could see that. When you have, again, just your team owner, your GM, just always in the media saying controversial things, it's not something you want. It's like the opposite of the Vikings. Like the Vikings have set up a organization that everybody wants to be a part of, and the Cowboys are just doing the opposite. So um, for the next team that I have, I have the Los Angeles Chargers. I really thought it was time for them to go out and make a power move, but it seems like they whiffed. They missed out on DK and Devontae Adams, and they need wide receiver help badly. And it doesn't help that their response to that was bringing back Mike Williams, which I don't really think he's going to do anything. I think he's kind of past his window, but I think they're being a little too patient during the Herbert era.
Yeah, and that one also made me wonder about, I mean, Jim Harbaugh. Like, do people want to go play for Jim Harbaugh these days? Or just is it seen as kind of another team in the league? Or did they not really want to pony up for the players that are out there? They will likely draft a wide receiver, I would expect. When you look at the wide receivers who are available, it's just not a good list. It's a very bad list. So the biggest thing that they were able to do is bring in Najee Harris, who will play better there than he did for Pittsburgh. I mean, if you're a running back for the Los Angeles Chargers, they have built their entire line to be a run blocking line. You've got Herbert as your quarterback. They're going to run a lot of play action stuff off that. But the running backs there were very successful last year. And we were just talking about J.K. Dobbins, got a lot of big plays, revamped his career. But Harris is pretty mid as a player and not somebody who's just going to change your life. I think he was in tough in Pittsburgh because they couldn't pass the football. But even then, even if he's 25% better. He's not a game changer. They signed him for very little money, which kind of told you what the league thought of him. That's been their biggest move. You're right. Hey, they re-signed Troy Dye, former Viking special teamer. They just don't have a lot of signings so far that would move the needle at all. So I agree with that. That's a pretty good pick. Who's number 3?
Yeah. Let's keep it in the division. I want to say the Raiders. I thought they were going to be a team looking to be aggressive in free agency, but it seems like they just lost players. And trading for Geno Smith for a third rounder, I get you don't have a quarterback, but I think third rounder is pretty valuable. And I'm just not. Geno Smith is not going to go win you games. Like, yes, I think he's a good quarterback and all, but he's just not the guy to go carry the team and win games. So giving up a third rounder for an old quarterback like that, I just don't agree with. And then not being able to keep Spillane and Morig in the building really hurts too.
Yeah, with Morig, I mean, he was one of my top guys if Harrison Smith retired. Like, go get him. I mean, he's a playmaker. He's a box safety. With Geno Smith, the tough part of that is that Geno Smith will raise your floor to you're going to compete. And Vikings fans know all about this world where you're going to compete and you're going to be in a playoff race and you'll be in the hunt and it will be a season that doesn't feel lost from the start. But is it really a team that's fighting for a Super Bowl? Like not really. No, if Geno Smith is your quarterback, you're not really fighting for a Super Bowl, especially with what they have around him. Is it Jacoby Myers is their top wide receiver? They're just not. I mean, that's not even close to DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and the Jigba. Like, it should be mentioned that he's had a good setup with Seattle. Not a great line, but a good setup in terms of wide receivers. And he's not going to have that unless the Raiders do something great. And I see, well, they might draft Ashton Genty. Like, that doesn't help Geno Smith a ton like wide receivers would, and they just don't have it. They are looking to just make a playoffs. It's been so long. So that's where I did understand it. And when you look at the draft, I'm not very high on Shadur Sanders. I'm not very high on Cam Ward either as being top quarterbacks. Tennessee looks like they have to take Cam Ward. They look like they have no other choice. They just have to take Cam Ward. So he's going to be off the board. Shadur being way, way overdrafted. Is that a better option? I mean, when you look around, you go, Russell Wilson, Joe Flacco, Aaron Rodgers, Kirk. They picked a fine. I don't disagree with what you're saying. You're kind of locking yourself into being mid, but they weren't going to tank with Tom Brady there. It's kind of the only thing that they could do. The team I probably would have replaced that with, because I didn't mind your first two teams, and I don't mind that one either. But I think the Bengals are probably a bigger loser here. They re-signed BJ Hill and then shrugs. They need an offensive line terribly. They need defensive talent terribly. They had one of the worst defense. They went from talking about how brilliant their defensive coordinator was. Oh, this Lou, whatever his name is, he's really great and all this stuff, got him to the Super Bowl, to firing him because they just lost all of their talent. And what have they done to replace it? Nothing of significance. I think that they have really struggled here. And I am surprised at you, Clay, because I know you don't like the Packers. I thought you would have. I would have put the Packers. What have the Packers done that has moved the needle at all? I think you were being polite. I think you were being nice by not putting the Packers there, but you don't have to be on this show. I think they belong as a team that needed to go out and find a receiver, needed to go out and add more talent around their quarterback. And instead they released their center, who's pretty bad, or lost him in free agency. They overspent big time on a very mediocre guard, and crickets other than that for the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, you're right. I did miss a chance to go in on the Packers, but you said it best, and I'll leave it at that.
All right, what do we got for winners?
Yeah, so the winners, I think, with the Chargers and Raiders kind of being iffy, I think the Broncos did a really good job. I think Talanoa Ufanga is a really talented player. He has to find a way to stay healthy, but if they can get him to that 2022 version of him, then this defense is going to be something different, especially with Drake Greenlaw also coming over. I know he only played one game last year too, but he had an 87.6 grade in that game. So I'm not too, and it was later in the year when he came back. So I'm not too concerned about him missing a lot of time last year. So, and then they added Ed Ingram, which is kind of but they really had no one at that position last year. So it's a big upgrade regardless.
Well, and Evan Ingram fits exactly what they want to do with Bo Nix. I mean, Bo Nix is throwing the ball a lot short, and then the occasional deep ball and the occasional scramble. And a lot of that could go to the tight end. They're kind of a possession and play defense type of team with Bo Nix. They're not just dropping back 50 times, launching it down the field. Did they make a move at running back? Because their running situation was pretty brutal. Maybe they're a team that has to draft one. They were one that was talked about with Aaron Jones, and I didn't see anybody that would be a game changer for them. So they've still got work to do. But I agree with you, stacking up their defense, getting a few more playmakers, getting somebody for Bo Nix. And that's what a lot of the teams have done that have these rookie quarterbacks is they've gone out and they've made moves. Another loser, though, could be the Falcons. They lost Drew Dalman. Not a lot else that they have done around, but they don't have the rookie contract because they're going to pay Kirk Cousins until the end of their lives in Atlanta. But that would be another team that would fall under the loser category for me. Okay, who's your next winner?
Yeah, the next one might be the biggest winner with the New England Patriots going out Carlton Davis, Milton Williams, Spillane, and Harold Landry. Just add key pieces to one of the worst defenses in the league. And that's something you should do when you have a young quarterback and you're trying to help him out as much as you can. So when your defense improves, you could afford to be more aggressive and it takes some of the pressure off of Drake May.
They need to find people to help Drake May. I totally agree with you. Patriots are a winner of free agency. They've brought in a lot of talent. They also have a coach now who knows what he's doing, as opposed to last year where that just went so horribly for Gerard Mayo. But even when you look at that roster, what was Gerard Mayo supposed to do with that roster? So building up their defensive side is a great idea. I didn't think that any of the contracts they gave out outside of Williams was a lot, but you need to do it if you're the Patriots. You have to overspend, you have to overpay. They also had more cap space than anybody else. So even though I would have been a little bit leery of the Vikings spending 26 a year on Milton Williams, the fact that the Patriots did it, you go, well, they don't have a budget. They just have all the money that they can spend, but they still don't have an offensive line for Drake May. And I don't know how they're going to get one. They trade for Garrett Bradbury, maybe. I mean, I really don't know how they're going to build up around him. And if you're wondering, this would be a name that Clay, you would not recognize, but maybe Vikings fans would. Vidarian Lowe is still their starting left tackle. He was a guy that the Vikings drafted in the 6th round and I think either released or traded to the Patriots for nothing a couple years ago because they were like, this guy's not really a player, and they've started him and played him a bunch, and like he's their guy right now. So they desperately need O-line, but I think that's going to be in the next wave for them. Who is winner number 3?
Yeah, I couldn't avoid it. I had to throw the Chicago Bears on here. Drew Dalman, that move seems to complete the offensive line rebuild, and he's one of the best centers in the game. So that should be a good move for them. And then they also got Grady Jarrett, which was a pretty whirlwind-like move. And obviously this isn't prime Grady Jarrett, but I think he'll be a good complementary piece to Andrew Billings and Trevon Dexter, allowing more of a rotation. So I think he's good. And then Dayo Odeyingbo, I think they definitely overpaid for him, but they desperately need guys that can get after the quarterback. And he had 8 sacks in 2023. He's also still 25, so we'll see if he can take a next step or something like that for Chicago.
I would also include Chicago as a winner of this, and congratulations to them for their 14th straight off season that they've won.
Back to back champs.
Right. Every year, man, that's Chicago. You know, they went out and got those free agents. So they have been doing this for a long time. In comparison, though, where would you? And I would put Washington. And part of it is a trade. So it's more if we've been talking about free agency, but Chicago with their trades as well in that discussion. I would put Washington getting Laramie Tunsil as a huge move for them. And they've lost a couple pieces. They brought in a couple pieces, but they, I think, have done the thing of getting better. Well, Jaden Daniels, we know, is going to come into his prime and be elite. But where would you, because I didn't tell you put the Vikings on there or don't put the Vikings on there. Obviously, you talked a ton about them. So I figured you would not include the Vikings as a winner. But if you did, where would they be?
Yeah, Vikings are 1, 2, if not. Like getting Will Fries and Ryan Kelly is huge, especially when you already have that's automatically one of the best O-lines in football. And then you go out and get Jonathan Allen and Hargrave. So, and Harris, like, there's just so many ands that come with it. So it's like they did a really good job. So I think they're top two of free agency winners.
And I still like their move for Isaiah Rodgers, which was a low key. That was their first move, and everyone's like, "Is this it? Is this all they're gonna do?" Not that social media overreacts to anything, but that was funny to watch that sort of play out. They're like, "Oh, it took them one more day than you thought it was going to." Let me get to some questions here, and we'll talk about some of the moves that happened today and how those impact the Vikings. What's left? What the next move is? Let's see. James asked, with Harrison Smith coming back for one last ride, what do you think we need to do for I assume you mean the rest of the off season to get him a ring? For me, the answer is on the offensive side, draft a guard and a running back who could be potential right away impact players. If they don't have another plan for a different guard, I still think another veteran guard needs to come in here. Maybe they still like Blake Brandel. I don't know, but I think another guard has to come in here. A running back who could be an instant impact player. And I do think this wide receiver 3 position could be upgraded. It really comes down to just continuing to build the thickest, deepest, best roster you possibly can to give Harrison Smith the best shot, because that's my joke every year when we get to the Super Bowl. What's the model for winning the Super Bowl? Oh, it's having the best roster. Kind of shocker, having great coaching and the best roster. That'll do it for you, folks. It's the easiest way from point A to point B, but they do have to hit on some draft picks who can help them right away. And they do have to improve their depth still. Right now, Ivan Pace or Blake Cashman goes out. I mean, you or I are playing linebacker for them. They do need, and Kerpluppy brings up Dalton Reisner. I would not mind seeing Dalton Reisner coming back. He is a weird story every year because he always has great pass blocking numbers, and then he has these bad run blocking numbers, and no one ever pays him because he's not a run blocker. So I wouldn't mind seeing Dalton Reisner back because you know that he can pass block at an exceptional level. And really, it comes down to how much can they do around their quarterback. Travis says TJ Hawkinson is Rudolph 2.0 catch and tackle. It's usually not that way. When you look at him when they got him and in his first year, his yards after catch are a strength for him. But last year he was playing on the repaired ACL. I think that will change that. John says with Cooper Kupp, problem solved. Hey, receiver guy. What do you think of Cooper Kupp and the Vikings, Clay?
I think that would be a perfect fit. Anytime he can be your go-to security blanket, it doesn't matter what team it is. That's a great addition. So, but especially in the Vikings case with a young quarterback like JJ McCarthy, I think it would be a perfect move for them.
What do you think he has left? Because his team is moving on from him. He's a legend on that team, and they're going out and getting Davante Adams, which probably justified your love for Davante Adams. A few weeks ago, you said you thought that he still had it in the tank, and the Rams apparently thought it was an upgrade to go to Davante Adams from Cooper Kupp. Contract is involved in that as well. The question has to be, how much is Cooper Kupp fallen off from being the guy in 2021? But now we are several years separated. For me, I don't need that to happen. I don't need them for him to be that guy from 2021. If he was, the Rams wouldn't have gotten rid of him. I need him to be reliable, underneath, open, somebody who's a security type of blanket for your quarterback. And then I'll let Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison do all the downfield stuff. But what do you think he's got left?
Yeah, I think he's definitely lost a step, but he's still a heck of a receiver. Like he's not gonna be a burner, but he never was. And his game is the intermediate game, the knowing which space to find, and you can do that. Like we saw with Keenan Allen. Like yes, he's slow, but he knows how to break down a defense, and that's really what matters. He's such a smart player, and he'll be able to use that to his advantage. So I think he'll be fine. And it's hard to say with the later half of the season because they really didn't give him the ball much. And I got to go back and check the film and see why, if he was just covered up or not. But early on in the season, right when he came back, he looked good. So it's hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that when you put up 67 catches, he was still a top 40 wide receiver in the league by PFF, which when you think about 32 teams, that's like a wide receiver 2-ish. Maybe on a team like this, you're certainly a wide receiver 3. But what I do wonder about Kupp is what is the interest around the league? It sounds like there's going to be a bunch of teams that are in on him, and there's probably some teams that are going to be able to pay him more or give him more opportunity. So, does he want to get a lot of catches? Or does he want to compete for a Super Bowl? Is he interested in playing with a veteran quarterback who he knows is good? Because the opportunity's out there, we just don't know what he wants. I do know that the Vikings coaching staff loves him. The Vikings coaching staff is borderline obsessed with Cooper Kupp. So if they want him, they could try like a kind of a full court press recruiting type of effort. Why don't we go through the players that signed today? You've got a list and we can kind of rapid fire through that and answer a few more questions. If you guys have questions for the show, comments, feel free to throw those in there now. But let's just go through like what happened today, who signed where, and get kind of an update on that. So go ahead with your list of people who signed today.
Yeah, so the first one I have is Joshua Uche. He signed with the Eagles. And how do you feel about that one?
I mean, that's just a classic Eagles. It's like I was saying earlier that the Eagles always go, oh, a pass rusher? Yes. Oh, another guy that we could put on the interior or on the edge or whatever, like somebody who, even if he's going to play 300 snaps, they'll just sign him. Uche is not good and has not been good, but when the Eagles sign him, you go, oh, wait, what if he is, though? Because he had some moments with the Patriots. The Chiefs are another one of those teams that seems to just pick up everybody else's junk. Like, oh, this guy was a top draft pick. Why don't we just try it? And every once in a while, they'll get something out of one of those guys, like a Kadarius Toney. So I don't think that he's good, but I think there he might be able to contribute something. And it's the very Eagles-y type of move. And that's why everybody else in the league with D-line is always kind of chasing them. Like, oh, they have 9 rotational pass rushers and they just bring them in and bring them in. And that's why if the Vikings drafted a defensive tackle or the fact that they have Dallas Turner, it's like, you don't just have to have the start. It's not Madden with injuries off. You don't have to just have the starters and play them all the time. And I think the Eagles really believe in that. All right, who's next?
Yeah, next up we have Adoree Jackson, which is another guy where it's like, I don't think he's that good of a player, but he went to the Eagles.
Well, they needed depth after Isaiah Rodgers left, and Darius Slay signed with
the Steelers.
Okay. So they needed a depth player. Adoree Jackson is that. He's one of those, hey, 3 years ago, he was really good, but has not been good the last couple years. I think he was a college football legend and then came in the league and had his moments, but has never really become that type of player that everybody thought he was going to be. So he's a guy that every year I feel like the Vikings looked at in free agency, or we looked at for the Vikings with Adoree Jackson, never really came to fruition, but just kind of a depth type of player.
Yep. And then next up, I have Mac Jones. He signed with the 49ers.
It finally came to fruition. Everybody thought they were trading up for Mac Jones a couple years ago. They end up taking Trey Lance. I will always wonder, I might be wrong, I will always wonder if they got bullied out of taking Mac Jones. I wonder if Mac Jones was the guy they wanted to take, and then everyone was like, you can't trade up that much for Mac Jones. They were like, yeah, an athlete is what we were really looking for, Trey Lance. It probably doesn't work that way, but I've always wondered, since every reporter thought they were doing it for Mac Jones. Here's another thing you wonder. After Brock Purdy becomes as great as he does, would Mac Jones have been Brock Purdy if he was drafted with that pick? Because similarly, he's an accurate quarterback who's kind of known for his processing and stuff. He's just given horrible teams since New England, but would he in San Francisco have looked like a Jimmy Garoppolo except for cheap, and they would have built this roster around him? Kind of funny to I'm sure Mac Jones was thinking about that when he signed there, but the completion of the story and just the backup quarterbacks are flying off the shelf. That is happening. And I don't know who the Vikings will be left with. I guess we will see. Shout out to Rick for trading down and not drafting Mac Jones. That is true. On draft night, I wondered about the Vikings drafting Mac Jones instead of taking Christian Darrisaw. Now, Darrisaw, of course, becomes one of the best tackles in the league. But the point was, they didn't have an answer at quarterback into the future, and maybe you should draft a quarterback. But obviously, the limitations physically for Mac Jones were problematic there. So, who
Yeah.
else?
The next backup quarterback is Gardner Minshew. He signed with the Chiefs. How do we feel about that?
Wanted him for the Vikings. Understand why anyone would sign with the Chiefs, especially since Patrick Mahomes always gets an ankle injury or two. You just come in, make one play, you get to be a Chiefs legend like Chad Henne or something, or you get to play Week 18 because they're not fighting for a playoff spot. That's always great for the backup quarterback. But yeah, I don't blame anybody for wanting to go to the Chiefs and try to win a Super Bowl there. Just thought that he was somebody who worked with Jalen Hurts early in his career, and he's kind of that 500-ish type of quarterback that you don't want to start for full seasons, but if you have to start for a short period of time, he's going to be your guy. Enthusiastic fella, but he was at the top of my list for guys that could be the backup for JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, I'm happy for Gardner. Backing up the best quarterback in the league is still one of the more slept on jobs in the league. So I'm happy for him. The next up, we have Laviska Shenault. He went to the Bills.
He was intriguing for me because we've talked so much about this. Well, who's going to be that underneath guy? And, Rob says Cooper Kupp on a reduced snap count would be perfect here. Yeah, I mean, I like that idea for the underneath possession receiver, but I also kind of like the idea of somebody who can be a yards after catch guy. And for a minute there, Laviska Shenault, when he was with, must have been Carolina, he had some moments where he really flashed some exciting ability with the football, or was it Jacksonville? Jacksonville, right? One of the 95 expansion teams he was with. And he flashed some exciting yards after catch ability. If that's in there for a quick pass screen guy, they do a lot of that in Buffalo, so I can see why they would want him. But I thought that might have been a nice idea for the Vikings to get somebody like that. He ends up going to Buffalo. There's not too many guys who fall into that category, though, where they are explosive enough and talented enough to be a short pass, yards after catch. That's the Deebo Samuel a couple years ago. Usually route running is what always is going to win for wide receivers, but that was one that I thought of, Laviska Shenault. I don't think he's going to stay healthy, though, so maybe that's a reason they stayed away from him.
Yeah, I feel like the Bills will sign every receiver except a true number one.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about it. But another receiver got signed, Olamide Zaccheaus. He signed a 1-year deal to the Bears.
Another guy who's like underneath, hey, this will be all of Caleb Williams' short passes will go to Zaccheaus.
All 1 million of them.
All 1 million of them. That's, what Ben Johnson, you can already see the Ben Johnson like wheels turning is they are going to run the football 55, 60% of the time. And they're going to run play actions where Caleb Williams can roll out and scramble and take a shot downfield, or they are going to screen pass to daylight. It's kind of what they did in Detroit. Tons of screen passes, lots of play actions. And then when it had to be on Jared Goff's shoulders, he was often able to come through, not in the last game against Washington, but over the years, he is able to come through. That's what they're going to do with Caleb Williams, it seems. And I feel like Zaccheaus, even though it's such an under the radar type of signing, him being a short underneath quick pass guy is kind of telling that they want to build that screen and short passing game for Caleb Williams.
Yeah, and it just gives Ben Johnson some more speed, which I think the Bears need on the outside. So I don't know how impactful he'll really be, but he did have one of his better years last year, getting like 500 yards, 3 touchdowns. So I think it'll be interesting to keep an eye on him. And then I don't know if this was today or yesterday, but A.J. Dillon, he went to the Eagles on a 1-year deal. How do you feel about that?
I wish him the best of luck. He was never good in Green Bay. And when he was on the field instead of Aaron Jones, you were happy if you were playing against him. You're like, good. Okay. Somebody goes to the Eagles with that offensive line, you just assume it's going to work. And it might for him. Did he even play last year? He was like out of the league, maybe an injury for last year. I don't remember seeing him at all. So I don't know. It feels like one of those guys. A couple years ago, they picked up the guy from, was it Miami? They picked up a guy from Miami and he was good for a year for them. They kind of do this all the time. I just don't really see it with A.J. Dillon. I've never seen it for him being a good running back. The Packers were kind of obsessed. It actually is a point that I made earlier in the show about Ed Ingram and how you draft them and you feel like you have to use them. Running backs are the same way, where if a team drafts a running back, even if he's not good, they'll keep playing him. And Green Bay did for years. So I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean, it's fine, but he just is never that slower guy who you're like, oh, he's just going to run through people. Does that happen in the NFL? I don't think it really does. I think explosiveness usually wins in the NFL.
yeah. I'm genuinely curious on if they're actually going to hand him the rock or if it's just a tush push signing. It was already hard to stop Jalen Hurts and Saquon, but now you add another guy who squats 1,000,000 pounds, and it's like the Packers are really going to be like, that's unfair now.
Yeah, right. The Packers are really going to cry some tears.
Yeah.
Rob mentions that the Theo Jackson deal is out. The other night, Rob, when that was announced, Ben Gessling said it was 3 years. So I had gone on the assumption it was 3 years. Maybe there were some other places that said it was 2, but yeah, it's 3 years. And it's a great deal for a starting safety, it looks like. I guess we'll see if they do anything else at that position. But I mean, if you're only paying on the salary cap less than $5 million for 3 years, it's a very Josh Metellus-y type of deal where they're trying to get ahead of it, sign him to the big-ish contract for him right now, but it won't look big very soon. What else we got?
All right. I think this is the last player I have from today. Kyle Juszczyk. He was released by the 49ers, but he met with the Steelers today. Didn't hear anything after that, but how do you feel? Where would you like to see him end up?
I mean, I don't know if he's still got it. I don't think that he does, but what a last beacon of hope for the fullback position. It is. This is an age gap between us. Fullback position is near and dear to my heart and soul of watching football. In the era that I grew up in, there were so many great fullbacks who were impact players, from the Mike Allstott, the Tom Rathman, the classic Tony Richardson, all sorts of them. They were either big blockers. You had like your Kimball Anders, your Larry Centers, your Sam Gash. They kind of came in all shapes and sizes, where some of the guys would be pure blockers and snowplows in the backfield. Other guys would be receivers out of the backfield. They'd be like underneath, catch a lot of passes, do a lot of stuff. And Juszczyk was that type of guy where he would do a lot of different things. He could line up in the slot and they'd throw him a quick pass, or he could block in different spots or hand him the football. And it was fun. I just think he was a really fun and unique and interesting player for San Francisco. He's done. I think it's over for Kyle Juszczyk, but I enjoyed his career, and there's almost nobody like him. And I don't know how many people are going to be like him into the future, because I mean, the Vikings are one of maybe 5-6 teams that still uses a fullback in CJ Ham, and they don't use him for anything more than blocking. So I will always appreciate what Kyle Juszczyk brought to the San Francisco 49ers.
The fact that I knew like little to none of the guys that you mentioned show kind of just how far removed the fullback position is. But yeah, he's a fan favorite, and I would love for him to just get 1 year with like Andy Reid or maybe like a Ben Johnson to just cook up some cool plays for him, just to have one final go.
Well, what we need to do is get you a PlayStation 2 and Madden 03. And it's, you got the old fullbacks and some of the guys that were still around from that time, and just play Madden out of the I formation all day long. And we'll show you who the great fullbacks were. It was a great position once upon a time, but things change in life. So here's a question for you before we wrap up the show. Thanks everybody for great audience. We didn't have the, whoa, can you believe the Vikings just did this thing? We didn't have that today, but we still had a lot of fun with the discussion, a lot more open conversation, I think, which we'll have a lot of going forward. And make sure that you go back and check out my conversation with Jeremiah Searles. A lot of you were asking, hey, when's Searles coming on to break down the O-line and D-line? So I did that earlier today. We reacted to the Ed Ingram trade. So make sure you go and check that out. How about the NFC North, Clay? I want your opinion right now at this very second and moment on how you would rank the NFC North teams. If you just got to pick right now how they're going to finish for next year, and how far back are the Bears of everybody else? I'm trolling you because you grew up in part in Chicago, but
Bears aren't last.
You don't think so? You don't think so? Well, it is hard to make an argument, though. It is hard to make an argument when you look at what the other quarterbacks in Detroit and Green Bay have proven, and what the Vikings have as a roster. but there's been a massive roster improvement in Chicago. And coach, this is the best division in football. It's not close. In fact, how many other divisions can you name? Let's go through it right now, real quick. We got time. Everybody's got time. They're here. They've got time. Other division in football where all four teams, their fan bases are pretty pumped about what's coming up next. Now, I follow a lot of Packers people. They're pissed because they wanted more and they wanted receivers. But the Packers fans, they always think that they're going to win. Always. They always think that they're going to win the Super Bowl. But even then, like, they still feel like they're going to be a top contending team. I don't know that I could think of another one. I mean, the Jets signed Justin Fields. Once again, best of luck to them and best of luck to Justin Fields, but you can't be high on that. The Cleveland Browns have to be distraught with their fans. Maybe the West, because Raiders fans are just in the desert with no water, and so someone just handed them a warm cup of water and a Geno Smith, this could get us to 9 wins. This is amazing. So maybe they're excited. I don't know. Yeah, but I think the NFC North might be the only one where everybody's pumped right now.
Yeah, there's always like at least one other team in all these other divisions where it's like, yeah, they just have no chance. So it's going to be really interesting. I got to go one. Oh, this hurts. It's really hard to see the Lions without Ben Johnson. I feel like people might underestimate the impact that he had on that team. I'll go Vikings 1. Purely because I believe in J.J. McCarthy's mindset and Kevin O'Connell and the improvements that they made to their interior line. 2, I'm going to go Chicago. I'm going to do it. I'm going Chicago.
You think the Lions are falling off that bad because of Ben Johnson?
Huh? I don't think it'll be that. I think it'll be close between the 2 and 3, whoever ends up there. It's just we saw Jared Goff in a prime click, like, gotta have a game, and he fell apart, and that's, I mean, their defense also fell apart, but he was a big reason why they didn't come up in that Washington game. So it's just hard, and like the schemes, yes, they're going to be able to retain some of it, but just him calling the game and having that feel for the game is going to be a lot different. So having him with the Bears and the revamped offensive line, I think their defense is, or at least their secondary and their linebackers are already really good. We'll see how the D-line improves or continues to improve. But I think it's going to be a big surprise to a lot of people in the league. And then I'll go Lions 3.
Real quick on Chicago. Okay. The thing about Caleb Williams is that we have kind of decided what we think of Caleb Williams already because we saw him for a year. And just the way football works, and no matter who it applies to, it could be Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's last 2 games were bad. Like, oh, stinks. Like, that's just how we are with everything. In week 1, whatever the results are, like, well, is that team in trouble? Is that coach on the hot seat? It's been 2 games and they're 1-1, right? We always overreact. That's why football's great. But with Caleb Williams, he was one of the youngest quarterbacks, and he had horrendous coaching, horrible culture, total laughingstock last year inside that room. And I would point to Bryce Young as reason to not maybe overreact to what happened last year. Caleb Williams was still the most talented quarterback in that draft. Him and Jaden Daniels probably pretty darn close, but still the guy that they talked about as being the most talented. So we can't just write off like, oh, well, he's probably going to get sacked 68 times again. If he doesn't and it clicks, it's going to be a problem for everybody else. So I think what you're projecting is that it will start to click for him. And if it starts to click for him, then they can finish second in the NFC North. I just don't think the Lions are going to drop off that far because of the roster they have. I think their roster is so much better than Chicago still, even after these additions. But are we picking the Packers as the 4th best team here then? So you're picking the Packers as 4th. Wow.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's going to have to be a really good draft for them because receiver, it's looking rough, and Christian Watson's going to be out the whole year maybe with his ACL. And then I just think they're not as, when I think of the Vikings and I think of the Lions and now the Bears' new culture, I feel like they're all on the rise. Like they're all, what type of mindset these teams are going to have. The Packers are kind of all over the place. Like they kind of dysfunctional locker room. Players are saying stuff to the media. So I just feel like they're not where they need to be mentally to keep up with the rest of the guys in these division. I still think they're going to be a good team, but not up to the NFC North new standards.
But their long held approach of not really doing anything in free agency, it might come back to get them at some point. And maybe they'll draft a receiver and maybe it'll be the next Devontae Adams or Jordy Nelson or whoever else. But I am a little skeptical of just their roster strength and where it's going to go into the future and if it can hang on. And so but the thing with Caleb Williams, my point is not that he was better than Jaden Daniels. Of course not. But coming into the draft, if Jaden Daniels was more talented in the evaluation, he would have gone number 1 and not number 2. And so Caleb was thought of as being the most talented player. And if that clicks, then it's going to be really, really good. But I think, Peter is pushing back on the Dahlman thing. The thing about Dahlman, and Peter, you're not quite right on the pass blocking. He was not above average on the pass blocking, but he was okay. I'll call this up for you. Last year with Drew Dahlman, where he ranked, because I think he was more like in the middle of the league. Let me check. Oh, he didn't play. Let me check. Because I looked this up. I think he was just okay last year. And now my search function is being a little tricky. Oh, I know. That's because that includes every position. Everyone just wait quietly while I look this up, okay? Yeah, he was 13th last year in pass blocking. So it's not like he was some sort of travesty. But the thing about Drew Dahlman is that he improves the run game so much. And so do the other guys. Jackson was good in the run game in Detroit. And then Joe Thuney is one of the best over the last 10 years. They are way better on the interior in terms of their run blocking than they were. Pass blocking, they were probably fine. It really comes down to whether the guy gets rid of the football or not, which before we run, Clay, you have a piece and I helped you out a little with the data over there over at purpleinsider.football, the newsletter, where we looked deep diving into the history of quarterbacks who get sacked as much as Caleb Williams. It's not great for Caleb Williams, and they are trying to prevent history from repeating itself with some of the other quarterbacks who got drafted high and then were sacked like crazy. So anyway, well, great stuff, Clay. And you're going to have more stuff over at purpleinsider.football on the NFC North. Soon enough is the next piece that you're working on. So that's cool. And we'll see what happens about going live. If there's more moves tomorrow, we'll probably do it. Usually in the off season, it's going to be Monday and Thursday are going to be the nights where we're live here and doing chats with you guys. Of course, lately it's been every night because free agency has been an amazing thing for the Minnesota Vikings and us and our conversations. But we'll see. We'll see if there's more to come on Friday. So thanks for your time, Clay. Appreciate you. Good job again. Intern Clay from the University of Pennsylvania doing his thing and avoided police sirens today. A big win for intern Clay in free agency. So thanks everybody for your time. Purpleinsider.football, the newsletter. Make sure you go check that out. And we will talk to y'all soon. Thanks very much. Football.